Yeah. So to be honest with you, it was literally three. I may have gotten. I can be honest with you. I could probably count on the hand over 3 years how many times I actually took a day off. Yeah,
Wow.
I was becoming exhausted. I realized I wasn't even taking sick days when I was sick. I
Hmm.
was missing a lot of my son's high school events. Time with family, friends. I think they all thought I was crazy. What have I done? And at that point, I was already in. I had cashed in my 401k to live, to get through the lean times. I had already was just starting to, just realizing it's this or nothing. Um, hey, Dad, I appreciate everything you did. I appreciate you hanging in there and building something.
Kyle first, and welcome back to the MSP Pipeline. Today's guest is Levon Parker, founder of Ascension IT. Before Ascension IT became a real business, Levon was a draftsman who got pulled into IT, promoted to IT director, and eventually just bet on himself. The most part people don't see is the first 3 years were brutal. No guarantees, missing family time, doing sales, delivery, and leadership at the same time, and still wondering if it was going to work out. So that's the story we're going to get in today. And I just want to say, Levon, thank you very much for being here.
You're welcome, Kyle.
Most MSP owners, they come up through IT. You didn't. You started as a draftsman, then moved into IT, then leadership. So that's a very different path. I kind of want you to walk me through that transition. How does a draftsman end up becoming an IT director?
Well, IT was always kind of a hobby. For fun, I would build computers, gaming computers, even very high-end computers for drafting. And then I noticed it came natural. It was so easy for me. Whereas most people struggled with different aspects of it, I didn't. And, I really advanced in my career as a draftsman. I pretty much learned everything there was to know. And at that point, you ask yourself, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. Do you want to do it for another 20, And I said, no, I do not. And I said, I'm going to start a business. So here we are. I just went out on my own. Luckily, that first 20 years, I had built relationships with a bunch of other engineers, architects in the industry. So that gave me a foundation of clientele to go look and explore options with. Without that, I'm not entirely convinced that I would have survived, honestly. But it was a good time. It was difficult. My job that I left became my first client, which was wonderful. Gave us a little bit of income, but then all of a sudden, as I started getting my first paycheck, which I believe was $1,400 that month, I realized to myself, I better start calling some people. So I started smiling and dialing, and here we are.
I love that. You got to start somewhere, right? So
Right.
What would you say, being inside an architecture firm taught you about how technology actually affects revenue and deadlines?
Well, I had a lot of good insight. So architects, what you don't realize is they will work through the night. They will have a deadline and they'll work at 2:00 in the morning. And to them, that's natural. That's their work pattern. Okay. It's all about the deadline, and time is money. If they can get a project out faster, then they make more money because they're paid on a percentage cost of the project. With that being said, any amount of downtime is detrimental to the project. And so you've got to keep that focus. You got to keep them up and going, just to make sure that they hit the deadline. And always, it seems like the day of the deadline, when you're pushing out the final documents, something goes wrong. Okay, I don't know what it is, but it's just like a curse. But as long as you can make sure that they stay functional and operational without hiccups, then they're loyal. They're a very loyal group, by the way. They don't like change. They really don't want to go out and shop for other IT services. They want to stay with you. So
yeah, I mean, you started a whole new business, and like most people skip this part where you you started off, your first 3 years were harsh, right? Long hours, no margin forever. When you first started Ascension IT, like what would you say a normal week would look like back then?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So to be honest with you, it was literally three. Yeah, I may have gotten, I can be honest with you, I could probably count on the hand over 3 years how many times I actually took a day off. Um,
Wow.
yeah, like it was 6 days a week, 7 days a week, sometimes 12-hour days. When COVID hit, unfortunately, I had to work on a Saturday with COVID, and just, I had a client who went down and they were operating on that day and they didn't care. They said, put on a mask, come on over. You know? But I do have to admit, it was more than I was ever expecting. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
Most people do not anticipate the amount of effort that you got to put in and ownership. You've got to take ownership for everything. You've got to take ownership that these people are counting on you, and you'll find yourself not being away from your phone in the middle of the night. You'll find there's no error for anything. You got to make sure that everything's covered. Backups are working.
Yep.
Nothing's going to go down. I never anticipated the level of work that I would have to do. Okay, that was a underestimation, the biggest underestimation that I had. But it has paid off finally, and you know, and the biggest part for me and the payoff was trying to transition to doing everything, to allowing myself to let go, to delegate, to trust people. If I hired somebody, I trust them to take care of my client, do it exactly the way I would, which is difficult, very difficult, because, people are different. But delegation is what allowed me to grow.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that, everything clicked at a point, but like back in those first 3 years, what was it doing to you physically, mentally? Like,
oh, wow. Yeah. I was becoming exhausted. I realized I wasn't even taking sick days when I was sick. I was missing a lot of my son's high school events, time with family, friends. I think they all thought I was crazy. I was beginning to think I was crazy about the third year, but then I started looking back and I started seeing progress being made, right? New clients, growth and revenue. And that's the only thing that kept me going. Just putting my head down and being stubborn. I think there has to be a certain formula of ADHD to be a successful entrepreneur. Okay. But with a weird, odd focus, right? Intense focus.
Yeah.
You can't stop. You just got to keep going. You got to go that next step, and you just got to put your faith in, your belief of it's going to happen. I do remember early I read a book by Napoleon Hill, and it's but it was basically outlining that the difference between the average human or the average person versus the millionaires of the world and the large businesses of the world was they believed they could do it.
Yeah.
That's it. They just believed it. They didn't have a doubt or anything in their head that said, I can't. They just did it. And I said, okay, sure, let's do it. Oh, and the book, by the way, is how, what was it? It's To Think and Grow Rich, or How to Think and Grow Rich, I believe, from Napoleon Hill. But the point being it was just belief. That was the only difference between, masterminds. I'm talking like Henry Ford and, the Vanderbilts of the world that grew empires. They just believed they could. Other people, their belief holds them back. So you got to,
Of course.
you got to shift that thought.
And I love that mentality. I mean, you got to keep going forward, right? So, I mean, I would assume though, I'm going to ask you this, but did you have those thoughts? I might have made a huge mistake in the early times when you started the company.
Yes, of course. There were times I was like, what have I done? And at that point, I was already in. I had cashed in my 401k to live, to get through the lean times. I had already was just starting to, just realizing it's this or nothing. If I turn back now, I'm starting my life over, and it's going to be a huge setback. So I have to push forward to hopefully get across the finish line. And the first 3 years were the biggest struggle, and the fourth year got better. The fifth year, a lot better. Some key people came on with the company, and those key people were the actual ones that we needed. That really kind of helped us. And then something happened. One day, I just started noticing that I was no longer pushing this giant boulder up the hill. We had crested the top of the hill, and it started rolling downhill. Now I'm chasing after that boulder, and it's kind of fun to be chasing it than to be pushing it, But yeah, exactly. That's kind of how it all panned out for us. But yeah, there was some real struggles there at the beginning of just, can I do this?
Of course,
my health was suffering, and I had missed so much that I regret. But now I believe one of the biggest things was my son was mad at me and felt like I was ignoring him. And recently my son had reached out to me. He's in 25 now, reached out to me and said, hey, Dad, I appreciate everything you did. I appreciate you hanging in there and building something. And to hear that finally made me accept, okay, I did make the right decision. I was worried. I was real worried for a long time that I really damaged a lot of relationships, but he said that, and it just meant everything to me, so.
That makes me emotional, to be completely honest. Sad story, but I love it. I'm glad to hear everything's working out there, because I was going to say, like, something definitely clicked, changed around that third year. It didn't happen overnight, of course, but enough business that started to work, right? So what would you say actually, like, what was the thing that actually happened to make everything click?
The right clients, number one, but also the delegation part, letting go. It was the hardest thing. It was so hard. There was a book I read. It's called the MSP Pumpkin Plan. Amazing book. And it talks about, number one, finding the best clients, letting go of the noisy ones, the ones that are eating up all your time and your resources, and they're not even paying you well. Those are the ones that are actually costing you money.
Yeah.
Focus on the best ones that are paying you really well. And also had a lot of operational stuff in there and about letting go, right? Delegating. And it was a great book. It's an amazing book for MSPs. Definitely pick that one up.
That's great. Yeah, definitely. I'm going to look into that for sure. And talking about your first customers, who were they? Where did they come from?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So there were architects and engineers. A lot of them I had already known because I'd worked with before. I kind of called them up, said, hey, look, I'm starting an IT business. And the funny thing, in the early days, it was really not, it was an IT business. And I think MSP was the term that was finally coming up on the scene, right? It was 10 years ago. People were finally switching from the break fix model to where everything was, hey, we're going to provide you a service. We're going to be proactive instead of reactive. And those early days, we were just trying to figure it out. I didn't even know that it was called an MSP. And as I did my research, dug deeper, finally found some good software partners to work with, and then like I said, I had to call. I just had to pick up the phone. I got some no's. Yeah, people said, no, I'm not interested. I've got a guy, whatever the story is. I picked that phone up and just kept calling because I didn't have a choice. I knew I was going to start starving soon. So keep calling, man. Just keep dialing. Get out there and social networking. A very successful business owner here in Birmingham, he's an older gentleman, and he told me, he said, hey, I want to give you some of the best advice is that people do business with people, not with other businesses. So build the connection. Build the connection first. If they like you, eventually they'll think about you or they'll need something and they'll call you. So that's what you've got to do. You got to build that relationship first. If you don't, then it's not going to work, So
Yeah, definitely. And like, I truly think connections are the most important part of any relationship. I mean, there's a reason we're doing the podcast, that we built something first of all, So what I was gonna say, like, when did Ascension IT cross its first revenue milestone? Like, whether that was consistent 6 figures or to get to 7 figures, like, how did that really go about?
yeah, so it was so funny. We stayed in 6 figures for a long time.
Mhm.
That was not hard for this business, staying in 6 figures. We finally hit 7 figures, and something happened. It was weird. I believe it was 2023. We hit 7 figures, and we went from like around 600,000 to 1.2 million.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like, "What happened? This is crazy." But once it did, then it set in my mind, that is the new bar, right? We're at 7 figures, and the next one up is 8 figures, and so we're still kind of pushing through the whole 7-figure plateau right now. But people say that there is honestly, for MSPs, there's a $1 million plateau that you hit, and it's like an invisible ceiling. It's very hard to break across because of client attrition, different things like that you will experience at $1 million of revenue. And I'm talking about gross revenue, but it's once you pass that, you will start to feel the relief. You finally feel like you're a real business.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, like, is the 1.2 today where you're at? Is that how the business grew? Or
no, we're bigger than 1.2 now. We're
wow.
we're trying to cross the threshold of just about our goal this year is 3.7.
Awesome. So how did that happen from, fast forwarding today, of course, like, how does that all happen at once? That's really exciting to hear.
Yeah. So since the sales cycles for MSPs is so slow and difficult, we discovered this early on. We're talking 30 days to 60 days, maybe in 90 days before somebody says yes and puts some ink on the paper, right? So what we would do is that on top of trying to get new logos, what we did is we tried to focus on, hey, let's see if we can find a smaller MSP that the guy's looking to retire. Maybe he's tired, he's exhausted, he doesn't want to do this anymore. And we would go and find them, and we would make them a deal. We would say, hey, look, we want to buy your client list. Everything else can stay to the side, but we're going to pay you for this. And we offered to do it over a 36-month. We would buy their client list. And so now that helped us grow. Now all of a sudden you're growing by 10 clients, 20 clients, and those leaps of numbers is the fastest way to grow. Without that, I mean, think about how long it would take to get 10 clients. I mean, you may spend all year getting 10 clients, Well, if you look and see that this guy's already built a relationship, and all you have to do is just purchase them, come in, and then build the relationship again. And then, definitely don't go in there going crazy and saying, hey, we're going to jack up your rates. Don't do that. I mean, go in there and just say, look, nothing's going to change. You still got the same people supporting you, and we're going to take care of you, and take some time to build that relationship. But that was what we've discovered is acquisitions of other MSPs looking to either retire or maybe they're struggling. I do realize, and I've heard this recently, that the baby boomers that are retiring is going to be the greatest wealth transfer that the U.S. has ever known. That wealth transfer is their retirement, meaning they're retiring and they have all these businesses. They need somebody to buy the business. They need somebody to run the business. And you've got to be willing to step in and take that and run with it. If you don't, then it's just probably going to die, honestly.
Yeah. And like, I mean, early on, I'm assuming you did a whole bunch of different sales techniques, right? But is there anything that you specifically thought that would work but didn't?
Pay-per-click.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, it got very expensive in our space. They want $5 to $7 per click, not for residential. And then that just cost me $5 to $7 because somebody clicked on it, right?
Yep.
You know, and it was that. SEO is kind of expensive in our business. You just got to look for the opportunities. You got to get out there. You got to sometimes talk to people. Do get into Chamber of Commerce. Do get into BNI. Do get into those kind of groups where you can talk to people and get to know other business owners. That kind of helped a lot for us. But the biggest thing was sometimes just going out and pulling a door open and saying, "Hi, we're just down the road. Just want to drop off a card. My name is Levon Parker. How can I help you?" You know.
I love it. I love it. That's a connection right there. It's going to get you somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But like, I understand you've made a very intentional decision to focus on architecture, engineering, and construction, not every single, industry. So why was that vertical focus so important to you?
because of my past experience, because I understood it very well, right? And look, unless you're something to someone, you're nothing to no one. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah.
Meaning that you've really got to prove that, hey, I understand you. I understand your industry. That's why you want to do business with me. But look, I've told architects before, I said, I'm the only IT guy that you're ever going to hire in this city that can pick up your CAD program and draw the same building you're drawing.
I love it.
Yeah. So
That's great.
that really made them think like, oh, well, he really does understand, right?
Like, were there any opportunities that, you might have had to walk away from to protect that type of focus?
Yes. Smaller stuff, a lot of smaller stuff we have had to turn down and say, thank you, but sorry. We try to, hold this tight to this niche, right? It's very important, and it's sometimes it's tough, when somebody reaches out to you, and sometimes you realize you're not a good fit. That's very important. Not all the money, people say that. I've heard people say, well, when you start a business, you need every dollar you can get. Yes, but eventually there becomes a time when every dollar is not a good fit. And you will realize it. You'll see it one day. You'll look and you'll say, well, they're not really a good fit for us, but hey, I know this guy's over here. Well, I want you to talk to them. I've referred business to some competitors, smaller ones, just because they weren't a good fit for us,
Yeah, I mean, that's really great. And but early on though, I know you say, you want to start a business and make as much money as possible, but was it scary turning down revenue early on?
It is. It's very scary. Yeah. Like I said, you just got to have that faith and that belief, right? That, it's going to happen. It's coming. You don't know where it's going to come from sometimes, but you got to believe that it's going to happen. I don't know what it is. But I always had a strong faith. And I've told people, I said, hey, do you have a problem with your faith or believing in stuff? And if they say yes, I said, okay, well, start a business. That'll cure that real quick. So, it's so funny. People don't even realize it. People open up a Starbucks. Well, they don't know that somebody's going to stop and roll in, but they have the faith, the belief that it's going to happen, right? They just know, oh, well, people recognize the brand. They're going to stop in and want some coffee.
So, of course.
Yeah.
Hey, that's great. And dealing with the team, right? How do you keep your team aligned when clients expect perfection and equal money in that type of aspect right there?
Right. Well, we've been very blessed with some really good team members. And I'll just be honest, we've had some bad ones. And but when you've got to try to course correct, and if you can't, you have to say we're not a good fit. And I know that's unfortunate, but the longer you hold a bad team member in the position, it's going to hurt your business, right? But we've been very blessed with some exceptional people that, one, he came through an acquisition of a competitor, and he jumped right in. He did not stop. He was a natural leader. He jumped in, took over several roles. He was always coming to me, saying, "How can I make your life better? How can I make it easier for you?" As soon as you see about somebody saying that, say, "Oh, well, let me reevaluate how much we're paying you," because they're worth a lot of money. So he was great. He was absolutely great, and he's kind of been helping us lead. Leadership is very hard and difficult. I do know that I had to learn internally, because I am not a natural leader. Believe it or not, I'm an entrepreneur, but that doesn't necessarily go in hand with leadership. Okay, so I had to start reading books again. It's about self-growth, learning, working on yourself internally. Believe it or not, I am what they call an extrovert introvert, meaning that I can be an extrovert outside in public all day long, but when I come home, I shut down. I just want to rest.
So how would you say your leadership skills have evolved? What's different from when you started the business to today?
Just trusting in my team, right? Letting go the whole, because when I first started the transition, I was a micromanager, and nobody likes that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to just say, "Hey, this needs to get done. Take care of it," and just go to the next thing, because there's so many things on your plate. Even as the business gets bigger, like now I'm having to work about marketing strategies, finances. I just got out of a meeting with our CFO. We were talking about a couple of things, that we're structuring in the business, and you're looking at numbers, you're looking at profit and loss statements. So my head's not in the day-to-day anymore. Things have changed. And because of that change, I have to accept that things are getting done on the back end, and just have the faith that they are taking care of it for you. Because if you don't, you're going to go crazy. You can't micromanage.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you want to have the people on your team that you can trust. You want to be able to put your full faith in them at the end of the day. And, I kind of want to get into the person listening who's thinking maybe I'm going to start an MSP, or maybe someone who's already in year 1 or year 2 of an MSP at the moment. What do people dramatically underestimate about starting an MSP?
The biggest thing that people underestimate is really, it's the amount of work, number one.
Of course.
Yeah, and the liability. Okay. They also underestimate their worth of the service that they're providing. I've seen so many of them come in and they want to offer this really low rate and get these clients without the correct margins, without the correct revenue. You're not going to grow, and you're not going to succeed, right? It's not you being greedy. It's you being able to afford to pay your technicians. It's you to be able to afford the correct tools that everybody needs. Even one of the biggest things that I started out was very good, very strong insurance, errors and emissions, liability insurance. Make sure that all those are in place, because all it's going to take is one mistake or one cyber attack, and that client that it was your best friend and you just did a good handshake with is going to come after you, right? And for all the damages and losses, and if that will wipe out your business, that a new business will get wiped out so fast,
Of course. And would you say you had a moment that I guess nearly broke you that maybe no one talks about?
Yeah, that's funny. I do have a moment that nearly broke. So one of my early clients, we were managing their systems, and they got an audit for their software. They had the correct number of licenses. Some of the licenses were being overutilized in certain areas. Well, the auditors fined them a big fine. And they came to us and they said, well, what are you going to do about this? And I was like, what do you mean, what am I going to do about this? Are you kidding me? And I was like, I didn't even really manage that part of your systems. That was your software, right?
course.
So we had to come to an agreement. Let's just say they got discounted rate for a while. Luckily, what I realized in that moment, always look for the solution. Every problem that comes up, there's an answer. Always look for the win-win. Win for you, win for your client. Don't fight, don't argue. You can stop and talk things through. Think, even if you have to take a couple days to think about it. Don't say, all right, I'll tell you what, let me think about it for a couple days and I'll get back with you. There's always a solution. And one of the early things that my dad told me was, you have two choices in life. You can be right or you can be rich. Make your choice, right? So
Great quote. It's a great quote.
It is. It really is, right?
It's a great quote. Yeah, I definitely might use that from now on.
Exactly.
So, what would you say, some skills that actually matter for most MSP owners that going forward now, and specifically in the futures, what should they have?
Well, the big buzz is AI, right?
Yep.
Don't underestimate it, how it can help you internally and also how it can help your clients. Your clients, it's a new tool. They're going to come to you and they're going to ask you how to use this tool. And you better be very creative or very up on your knowledge to help them, guide them, because something has changed, right? People don't care about what cybersecurity software you're using, how you're patching their servers, how you're backing their systems up. People are now more focused on outcomes. It's the outcome. They want to come to you and say, what's the outcome? What's the ROI? How is this going to help me? If you can focus on that and help them, the rest falls into place.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is the biggest thing that people are dealing with right now is AI, the tools. And I know that's so cliche, but it's just a tool. You've got to come up with the imaginary way to use it, to go to your client and say, hey, do you know that you can do this and save X on production, right? Sometimes it even takes sitting in your client's office and watching them do something and say, well, why did you do that? They said, well, that's the way we always do it. You realize you can cut about 10 minutes of your day from doing that to doing this? And they'll think you're a genius. I mean,
what a feeling right there.
Right? Exactly. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for those kinds of relationships. Not just, I've got you secured. It's how can you help me do my business better? And until you can demonstrate that to them, that's where you take that next step. And you're just no longer a IT guy. You become the trusted advisor. You become the person that they're going to come to and say, hey, we're looking at doing this. Will this help us any? Will we get a return on this? I've literally looked at clients' workflows, and I had one the other day. I was like, so tell me, what do you do next? And I don't know why. We were just having a business review, and I was like, so you mean to tell me that you do this, this, and this, and this? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, wouldn't it be better if you just kind of doing this to this? And as soon as I said that, you just saw them look at me like, how did you, think about that? Like, because I'm standing outside the box, right? A lot of these people are too busy in the forest to see the trees, right? So I'm standing back and I'm like, well, from where I'm standing, it looks like this would be better, so that's important.
Yeah. I mean, technology does keep changing though, and not everyone understands it, probably like yourself, of course, but where do you think the real value comes from then?
That's just it. People don't understand it, right? You're literally, for all they know, they see you walk in, they think you're the wizard. I mean, they do not understand what you're telling them. Even if they ask and you tell them, you can see the garage door kind of closing, in their minds, and they're going, okay, I didn't need to hear all that. But, but once again, it's a different language and it's a different mindset. What you've got to do is you got to identify risk. You got to identify, increased productivity without being that and without giving it to them. They're just going to look at you as to them, that's no different than the person who's cleaning, the office at night. It's a service, right? And they're going to shop you like a service, yeah, right. Yeah. They just say, well, hey, this guy provides a service, and this guy provides a service. This service is cheaper. I'm going to go with this, even though the quote may not be apples to apples. It may be completely apples and oranges, until you establish that. You say, well, we are doing this for you and we are protecting you. And this person is just only going to give you antivirus, and we're going to give you a SOC, and we're going to give you even point detection response. We're going to give you layers of security that's, 5 layers deep. That's what you got to kind of convey. The hardest part, I do believe, is people truly understanding what you do. People seeing the value. You've got to sell the value, right? Sell the solution. So got to find the problem too. Yeah. And their problem may not, I hate it to go in there and try to sell somebody antivirus when their problem's really backup. And they don't know that. You just say, hey, do you realize it's going to take you a week to restore operations if your network went down? And they're like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, you're using this kind of backup. This kind of backup over here can restore you in literally 24 hours. And they're like, well, I want that. But they didn't know they wanted that, right? They had backup and backup, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy you show that value when you go there and talk to your clients. It's important right there. So, to close this out though, right? We have a 2-part question. We're gonna start with the first part. If you can go back to year 1, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Don't give up. It's going to hurt. And I mean, really, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt physically. It's going to hurt emotionally. It's going to hurt in a lot of ways, but don't give up. One day you will stop and look back and be thankful you did it. Stay focused. That's it. Yeah.
That's awesome. And the second part is, what would you tell the MSP owner listening right now, who's deep in that grind and wondering if it's worth it?
I would tell them, hang in there. Believe it or not all the other MSPs out there are your competition. Sometimes they're your best friends. We're all in the same sandbox. We're just playing in this big sandbox there's a lot of things we can relate to, whether it's clients, whether it's, hard times, struggles. We're all in there. And I do recommend they go get the MSP Pumpkin Plan book. It's amazing. It will change your life. Let me tell you one thing real quick. The opening sentence, or the opening chapter, first chapter, it says, when a dream becomes a nightmare. And that caught my attention because I was kind of in the throes of what felt like a nightmare. And then it starts laying out all these things. And I'm like, I'm living this. This is my life. And then they start telling you how to fix it. It can be fixed. You got to make the right decisions. You got to make the hard choices. You got to get the right team members in place. Everybody sitting on the right seat of the bus. Until that happens, nothing's going to work for you. But you can do it. It's just very, very hard. So.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. And I just want to say, once again, thank you very much for being here today, Levon. It's been a pleasure to have you on. And I'm looking forward to watching this myself. And I just want to say thank you once again.
No, thank you, Kyle. I appreciate being on here.